I wanted to introduce you to Fernando Gutierrez Luna, who is here from Mexico, who is going to be introducing Sean Linehan. Fernando, do you want to use the podium? Thank you so much for introducing him. And Fernando is an entrepreneur in his own right. Not only has he started a new business at the ripe old age of 19, but he's already failed. The first step to true entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So hi, my name is Fernando. I'm an exchange student from Mexico. And I jumped on the opportunity to introduce Sean today because throughout my life, whenever I've reached a major goal or milestone, and even more so when I failed, one of the many times that I failed, I've realized that I've only been able to go through that because of the amazing mentors that have guided me in every step of the way. And that's really when I realized how life-changing a mentor can be. And now that I am 3 semesters away from graduating from college, I've experienced just lightly how stressful and overwhelming job searching can be. And that's why I wanted to introduce Sean today, because Sean is helping people achieve their biggest ambitions by connecting them with top-tier mentors that guide them in every step of the way in building the professional life that they want and even more. Sean, like they said before, he graduated from Cal, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Placement. He was one of the first 20 employees at Flexport, and during his time there, he helped grow the company from $1 million in sales to $500 million in sales by the time he left, when he was the VP of product for the company. And Placement is backed by Founders Fund and by the founders of DoorDash, Flexport, Eventbrite, Open Door, Product Hunt, Instacart, Village Global, and many, many more. So because I know you guys are all as excited to hear Sean speak as I am today, please welcome Sean Linehan.
It's so nice to see you. We have a little bit of your timeline here, and we have a tradition that we usually start with your timeline. And when we spoke, I said it'd be great to hear how you started things, but what would really be fantastic is if you could talk about after you started some of the different pivots and iterations. And then you sent me and told me a bunch of stories. So I would love you to start going through your timeline, but I ask everybody to help me that I don't just focus on that, because I love these stories. And as you start talking about placement, I thought it would be nice that if instead of waiting until we're finished, like half an hour in, that as you all have questions, you just raise your hand. And Rishi and Fernando, do you know this, Fernando? Have microphones. And I just ask if you have questions, just like you would on Zoom, except you're actually raising your real hand. Just raise your hand, and Rishi and Fernando will come by and give you the microphone, and you can just ask a question, ideally about something that Sean's been talking about. And then we'll have time later on for random and different questions. You don't have a microphone? That'll be hard. So let's talk a little bit. I've got some pictures that you sent me.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit. So we met, I should say, we met when Sean and his 2 co-founders were in a dirty room, pretty much, in the Chase building. And no matter what time I got to work, you all were still there. For all I know, you were living there. So,
fun fact.
Yeah?
I did sleep there a couple nights.
That is so gross. It's pretty yucky there.
It was.
But what's interesting to me about that is I had no idea you were in school. And I actually wasn't sure if you graduated.
I did graduate. One of my proudest accomplishments was not dropping out despite the extreme urge every single semester to do so.
You are somebody who is, it's just in your bones. You seem to be entrepreneurial. And I don't normally start prior to Cal, but if you look up there, I've got some things that you did before, and I actually have some pictures, and I thought it would be fun to share this with you all. And everybody bear with me, my lovely thing isn't working, but I thought that we should start here. You know, it does look like this is when Sean was 4, but that's not quite true.
I was in high school.
Yeah.
In the far left there, I was actually in high school, if you can believe it.
So tell us what this was.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of kids start their entrepreneurial career selling candy in high school or T-shirts, and in that respect, I was no different. I started a T-shirt company, oddly named Algorithm Clothing. I had programmed at this point, but I wasn't quite well versed in what an algorithm was. Certainly, that took a lot more time. But you know, starting a clothing company is low capital intensivity. You're able to design something, put your vision into the world, and sell it to your friends. And so it's the perfect business for somebody who's young to start. And yeah, we didn't have enough money to actually get real screen printing machines, so we'd get the screens burned. I don't know if you've all seen how screen printing works. We just use clamps and do them in my backyard. And this is actually the first run we ever did.
Sean, where did you grow up?
I grew up in San Bernardino, California, which I like to affectionately call California's armpit. It's the part of California that's very hot. It's not the beach. It's not the bay. It's not much going on, but yeah, good place to grow up. It's a suburb.
So what I really like is the second picture. Does anybody notice anything about the second picture with the yellow background? I'm just wondering, is that the same co-founder?
No, I wish.
It looks almost like the same guy. I thought maybe you were doing the same thing again. So tell us a little bit about Cloud9.
Yeah, so I ran an all ages nightclub, which is a funny thing. So one of the things that's really interesting is entertainment and spending on entertainment is counter-cyclical with recession. It sounds counterintuitive. You'd think, during recession, people have less money to spend, but it turns out they solve their emotional wounds by spending on entertainment. So this was maybe 2009. Post 2008, teenagers weren't able to get jobs. There wasn't much going on. San Bernardino in particular was hit very hard by the housing crisis, and nightlife was booming. So I started this all-ages nightclub. We rented out a 5,000 person capacity, sort of max capacity venue, and ran a weekly nightclub. We had 150 high school promoters, and we got about 1,000 people a week to show up to this thing.
This is what kills me. This poster.
So I designed this. This is my very first event I ever threw, called Techno Roll. It was actually at a roller skating rink. And people were, clubbing on roller skates. It was something else.
So you charged $25?
I did, yeah. I mean, this event in particular, actually, this one's funny. So I was the graphic designer for this skating rink before. I had started, passing out skates, whatever, and then the owner let me do graphic design and run their website. Then he let me run this event, and the hilarious thing was it was a complete flop. And I lost him tons of money, and he fired me. But along the way, when I was promoting this event, I met not this guy. This was one of our DJs, but I met another guy who was 17 and was also running events, and we teamed up, and it was him and I that started Cloud9, which was our weekly event.
Oh, fantastic! And then it was time for Cal.
That's right. Yeah, and then I went to Cal and left it all behind and never went out at night, which was a complete change.
Is it true? So Serby told us last week or 2 weeks ago last week actually, where she lived first year. Do you remember where you lived?
I lived in Unit 3.
Was that where Serby lived too? Oh, this could be an interesting statistic that we're going to have to start to track.
Very entrepreneurial unit. If you're in that one, Unit 3.
How many Unit 3s are out there? Loud and proud. Let's see it.
Your futures are so bright. So bright.
There you go. So you did a lot of stuff while you were still at school. I mean, while you were studying. I mean, I know you studied hard. Let's see if I can do this now. Tell us a little bit. Let's see if I can get this to move. But while I'm doing that, tell us a little bit about your Cal days and what classes you were taking, what you were doing.
Yeah, when I got to Cal, I honestly didn't really understand how college was supposed to work. I felt a bit like a social outcast. I mean, where I grew up, I didn't know very many people that went to college. College was not the default route. So I sort of just showed up. I had visited Berkeley once. I applied to a couple schools, wound up here. Very thankful that the sort of luck of the draw led me here. But I think the most pivotal moment for me at Berkeley was about 3 weeks in. I saw a flyer for some club that I doubt maybe it still exists. It was called the Freshman Sophomore Entrepreneurship Society. Does this ring a bell for anybody? I doubt this exists. It didn't seem to even make it the whole year that I was there. But what was amazing, so I see this flyer. I was like, okay, entrepreneurship, cool. Like, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been running this event. I did a clothing company, and I saw that a guy that was running a watch company called Modify Watches was going to be the speaker. And I was like, cool, this is going to be awesome. And the guy's name was Aaron Schwartz. So I show up, and when I showed up, I was wearing basically the same type of thing I'm wearing now. I was wearing denim and a shirt. And when I show up outside the room, everybody's in a suit. I literally didn't own a suit. I had never in my life put on a suit. And I'm sitting there just like so insanely embarrassed because I'm the only person who's not in a suit. And then this guy walks up wearing like cargo shorts and a t-shirt. And I was like, thank God, one other guy. It's gonna be me and that guy, we're homies. They open the door and the guy in the cargo shorts is the speaker. I was like, yes. So anyways, he talked about his business. It was this watch company, and I was really into fashion. You could see in that last picture, I was so fashionable running this nightlife. And I loved the watch. They were these really cool watches. So he asked, anybody here start a company? My hand was the only one that went up, and we sort of kicked it off. I gave him my resume, which was quite light, and started working for him. And he really became my mentor. I mean, he taught me how to be a professional adult. He gave me a lot of opportunities. He dealt with me while I was in school. I ran his website, so I built all their e-commerce. I built their social media marketing team. We built that business into a couple million a year in sales, which was great business.
So how did you do that while you're still in school? I mean, how did you allocate your time, or did you?
So I'm gonna just admit something that I maybe shouldn't admit. I skipped most of my classes most of the time. And I did Haas School of Business, not because it's a very valuable degree, love that degree. I walked out of that education thinking, man, I know things that I otherwise wouldn't know, but it was pretty easy. Like, if you guys are doing EECS, I couldn't imagine doing EECS and not going to class. Like, you're failing out, I'm sorry. But you can skip macro econ, it turns out. You can wing that one. So I just spent a lot of time working. It was what I liked to do, and it felt very practical.
Yeah. How did you know if you were successful or not, or was it just experience?
What's so interesting is I feel like so many people are planners. They got this whole vision of their life set out. They have this specific end state that they want, and I'm just not a planner. I'm very much more going with the flow and trying to just maximize what's in front of me, right? Like, I had no intention of getting an internship or working for this watch company. Eventually worked full-time for them, even when I was in school. And it was just really like, do I feel like I'm growing? Do I feel like I'm learning something? Are the people that I'm surrounded with high quality? Do I feel like I'm a better person this year than last? And so long as all those boxes were checked, then I was a raging success. I mean, there was no specific goal I was trying to hit.
That's great. And then how did you, end up starting with Einstein and end up coming down to the Chase building, which is totally on the opposite end of where Haas is, but yeah. But since you were not going to classes, it's all making sense now.
Right. So Einstein was a mobile app that did product recommendations. Think about, it was basically a personalized version of the wire cutter. And we tried to do this way before the technology actually was good enough to do that. So we were trying to do natural language processing on online reviews in 2012. And natural language processing just wasn't good enough at that time. The big problem was sarcasm detection. You couldn't quite detect sarcasm then. With deep neural networks, you can detect sarcasm quite a lot better. The big problem was actually detecting legitimate reviews, which is another problem altogether. But the way I got there was, so Modify was an early player in direct-to-consumer e-commerce. And I was experiencing e-commerce. We were building stuff before Shopify even existed. We actually had our own self-hosted shopping cart that we built because that was what you did in 2010.
Okay, you're saying we built. There were 3 of you in that room.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just curious.
Well, so it was me and Davey building, and then Ben Einstein was our BD guy, helping get inventory and hustle for us.
Okay.
But yeah, we, the royal we. Even when in startup land, you never say I didn't do anything. We did everything, even if it's just you.
Ah, so interesting. I feel like I have one other picture with Ben. There you go.
Yeah,
At graduation,
yeah.
where it actually looks like you're thanking the heavens or something, like I made it. And I think that's Ben standing on his head.
Yeah, that's about right. That was pretty much what we were thinking. We were thinking, thankfully, we actually got it done.
So it sounds like a pretty incredible business model. It doesn't even sound like it was ahead of its time. What happened?
Well, I would say that the tech was not quite right. And then me and Ben we had a bit of a falling out. And he's a great guy, no water under the bridge. But I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is who you start a business with is really important. We didn't know each other that well when we started the company. He's clearly brilliant. I think ultimately
his last name is Einstein, and he is a relation, but he's not necessarily clearly brilliant, but it helps.
That's right. We got Einstein.com because his family owned it, which was amazing. We looked a lot bigger than we were. No, what happened was he wanted to be the boss and I wanted to be the boss. And when you got two people that want to be the boss, it doesn't work. Like you really have to figure out what swim lane each of you and your partners are going to be in. And if there's massive overlap in terms of what you both, or one or more of you would like to be doing, resolving that can be tricky. And I know a lot of people that have had their companies blow up due to founder conflict. And it's likely often the same situation. You think that you both should be doing each other's job and it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to also talk about that a little bit. So you thank the heavens out of Cal. Let's see if I can get this to work. Let's see if here I actually thought this was interesting too. A little bit more of what you were doing. I don't know if you're interviewing.
Can I tell this story? This story is amazing.
Well, who is that man? He looks familiar from the back. That's why I'm wondering.
He is a news anchor.
Oh.
So this is an amazing story. So while starting Einstein, don't ever do this. Please don't start multiple businesses at a time. It's a really bad idea. But we did it. So we started this company called Vape Secret. I used to smoke cigarettes. Cigarettes are bad. Don't smoke cigarettes.
This is when we thought they were good, though. Initially, you may not know this, but cigarettes used to be thought of as good also. But
yeah. So when e-cigarettes came out and everyone was trying to promote e-cigarettes to get people to quit smoking tobacco. And by and large, it did work. There's studies now that show that vaping is a great cessation device. Don't vape, really bad for your lungs. But as a cessation device, it was great. So we started this Vape Secret company. That's what it was called. And it was honestly a total fly-by-night operation. We sourced some products from China. They were pre-existing products. We did no product development whatsoever. We just bought these products, put together what I think was a pretty beautiful website for the time. Again, this was actually even pre-Shopify. This still was not a Shopify website. We had a friend who somehow had a connection to the news, and she calls me and Ben one morning, and she says, "Hey, we're doing this segment on vaping. You guys sell some of these vapes. Do you want to be on the news?" And this was actually Ben's stroke of brilliance. He said, he had this raspy voice. He said, "Yeah, come film it in my garage. This is where we do it." And she was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, we're a garage startup." We were not a garage startup. We worked in downtown Berkeley in a very nice office.
Yeah, and Ben actually does sound like a 65-year-old man.
Yes, he does. And so immediately he called me. He's like, "We got to make my office, or we got to make my garage look like a startup office. The news loves a garage story." And I was like, "All right, let's do it." So I go to his house, and his garage is packed with stuff. So what we wind up doing is we wind up clearing his garage as rapidly as possible. Along the way, we find this ice cooler that was just sitting in there, and separately a 12-pack of beers. And while we were going, we were like, "Oh man, wouldn't it be great if we just had a cooler full of beers?" It's this quintessential meme startup story. So we put all these beers in there. We made it look like we had this whole fulfillment center set up in the office. We even, if you can see here, we put our motorcycles. We both rode motorcycles. We put our motorcycles in the garage just because we thought it made it look edgy and cool. And the reporters showed up and they ate this story alive. They just loved everything about it. They even in the news segment showed the cooler full of beers because everybody loves this garage startup story. Anyways, we were supposed to be 5 seconds of this clip, and we wound up being the whole news story.
Did it help you?
We sold all of our inventory and never bought any more. That was the end of Vape Secret.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So at the risk of like, I love all these stories, but there's one story that I really was enamored by, and that's how you started with Flexport before you started placement. And I'm wondering if you can talk to me. Oh, I'm sorry. How could I have forgotten this? Then there's post-cal.
So this is me with all my things in my car. It turns out so I was an entrepreneur for years before I had a job, and it turns out nobody trusts somebody who makes their own money. Maybe this is different now, but nobody would rent me an apartment. My parents couldn't co-sign. That wasn't possible. So I actually lived in a motel for a while and kept all my stuff in my car. That's pretty tough. It was actually one of the reasons why I got a job, because at some point I was like, dude, living in a motel, you got to move every 30 days. If you live in a motel for 30 days, then you got to be somewhere else for a day, and then you can come back. And it's just like, such a mess. And it's more expensive than an apartment, if you can believe it. So anyways, the world isn't very kind to people that don't have normal employment.
So this is you and your best friend from?
From high school, actually. He came and moved in with me because everybody else I knew had left. So he came up, we had bunk beds. We had bunk beds together and then slept in the same motel room.
Oh my gosh. So Flexport is a company founded by Ryan Peterson, also Haas. I think he's a Haas.
And he was a Berkeley alum. He studied history and then did his MBA at Columbia.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Tell me a little bit about how you heard about them. And I think I have, now we get to see all my emails here. Go and tell a little bit about Flexport and how that came about.
Yeah, totally. So at some point I'm living in this motel, right? And living in a motel sucks for reasons already stated and many more also obvious reasons. And I decide, look, I'm running out of money. The startup I'm working on is not quite working. Maybe I should do a little thing called getting a job. To me, it felt a bit revolutionary or radical. It was something I hadn't quite planned on. So I was researching companies, and the things that I was looking for were, what is something that I think is intellectually interesting, sort of important to society, something that can be huge, and even if it doesn't work, that I still feel like I got something out of it. So I wound up coming across Flexport at an event called Startup School, where Ryan pitched Paul Graham on stage, pitching the story of Flexport.
Paul Graham, Y Combinator, just in case.
Yeah, founder of Y Combinator. And I remember it was so funny because at the time he pitched, it was TurboTax for customs. And I had just come off this stint doing Vape Secret, where we were dealing with import-export. And it was a total black box. I felt like every vendor we worked with was trying to take our money and lie to us. It felt super scammy and shady. And here was this guy saying, hey, I'm going to bring opacity to it. And I was like, this is a great business. But the thing was at the time, customs, I was like, man, this guy's going to make so much money, but God, it's so boring.
Yeah, it's the sexiest way I've ever heard customs described. TurboTax.
Right, it was so boring. But I kept tabs on the company because I thought this might turn out to be something. And something like this was that would have been maybe 2013. Maybe 9 months later, I checked in on the company and they had started doing actual freight logistics. And I don't know about you all, I find infrastructure super sexy. Like even before ever joining Flexport, I had just spent time down at the Port of Oakland because it's cool. These boats are so big, right? Like humans can't ever, like the machinery is amazing.
Sean, can anybody go spend time with the boats? I've never heard of anybody doing that.
You can just, there's a park at the Port of Oakland. You can just go hang out and watch the container ships get unloaded, and it's super cool. I mean, containers are the lifeblood of modern civilization. It has lifted 1 billion people out of poverty. Mm-hmm. And I had known all this before joining Flexport, but I also knew that it was, one of the things so interesting about logistics is that the machinery is quite advanced. You have these incredible mega ports. In some nations, like in Amsterdam, the ports are fully automated, totally orchestrated by robots. But the process of actually getting cargo onto that ship and managing that whole process is totally done manually. It's like the craziest, weirdest dichotomy. You have a business that's like run by robots and then run by fax machines. And you're like, how did we get here? So yeah, that led me to Flexport. I decided to get a job and actually joined them as this was the team a couple months after I joined. That was the Eng team. So
that's Ryan on the left.
No, so this is actually all our engineers. This is a guy named Andy, a guy named Mike.
Looks like Ryan.
Yeah, it looks very similar. They were sort of bros. Then me, and then Evie, and then Tuan. And yeah, that was the whole Eng team circa maybe January 2015.
Wow. Then up there you're talking at the house.
Yeah, so that's me and Ryan. We gave a pitch on entrepreneurship or something similar to this, I suppose.
Do you all know where the house is?
It's been this building's been torn down.
Where is it now?
It is in the cloud.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. Some people are just slow to learn these things. And then you all are growing here. I think that's you.
Yeah, I'm in the back. You got me. I was dressed as a biker. This is Halloween. So this is actually just maybe about a year later. So you can just see, like, this is January 2015. This is maybe October 2016. And, all of a sudden we're 50 people or something. And then this is our plane, which we got in 2018. Bonkers.
So Flexport has been named like the fastest growing business. It's done incredibly well. Maybe not the most like exciting because you're as a consumer you don't see
No,
it.
it's super sexy.
But oh yes, all right, fine. But in terms of enterprise, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
What happened that got you away from Flexport?
So I joined the company when I was 21 years old, and I was the fourth software engineer. At some point, I basically went rogue and just started building their product. I thought the product basically didn't exist when I joined. I felt a little duped. I get in here and the product was nothing, and I was like, you guys should probably have a product, sort of selling a future-oriented story. Let's actually deliver. I went rogue and just started building the thing, talking to customers, and I thought, basically what I thought was like, look, like either this company loves what I do, recognizes that they do need software and do need a great, nice product, or they fire me. And I was kind of down for whatever, It's like, if the company's not ready for software, then you got the wrong guy. And fortunately for me, they promoted me to the head of product. So yeah, I ran that team for a number of years. I ran the product management team, growing it from me to 15 people. I at some point took over the design, brand design, comms design, product design team, and the product operations team. At this point, we're 800 people. We're doing $500 million in sales. I was 25 and on the executive team.
It's that much growth in just a couple of years.
Yeah, it was insane, totally insane. And I was 25 and on the executive team, and I was the only person that was that young. Everyone else around me is, I think sort of maybe the appropriate age, the appropriate level of experience, what you'd somewhat expect.
What is that, 33?
I mean, we actually had, we had proper adults, some people are in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I was this young kid. And at some point, we were 800 people. I was staring down the hiring plan that I had. I needed to hire 50 people. I was like, dude, I want to go start a business. I don't want to do this. Not to mention, like, I think we raised $1 billion. We basically announced it right after I left. And at some point, the 25-year-old on your exec team starts to be a liability. They're like, are you sure? Why are we really going to trust this company with $1 billion or hiring a 25-year-old? And at some point, just for aesthetic reasons, you put somebody that looks credible.
But mind you, you'd had 15 years of business experience at this point, but okay.
I think I was doing a plenty fine job, but at some point, you make the decision, you cede responsibility, and I was very happy to do so.
So now you're in a situation where I hope you'll tell us how placement came about and how you started to execute on it.
100%. So,
and I invite you all, as you have questions, and Rishi and Fernando, if you have questions, just raise your hand if that's all right as you're telling what has happened.
Totally. Yeah, so placement, after I left Flexport, I just took some time off. If that type of crazy hyper-growth experience it's very physically and mentally taxing. But I'm a bit of a compulsive entrepreneur, so I took, call it 3-4 months of doing nothing, which was hard in and of itself, but necessary. And then
what did you do when you did nothing? I'm just curious what that means.
I read a lot of books. I started angel investing, and I worked out all the time. I was like, just keep your brain active, keep yourself going.
Angel investing is hard in itself.
Yeah, it's fun. I just invested in people that I had met and spent time with. I had spent a lot of time networking with random people and getting excited about what they're doing and feeling like, I wasn't like industrial scale angel investing. Some people go out there trying to write checks every month.
Yeah.
I was doing it a little bit more casually.
Okay. So that was your time off?
That was my time off, yeah. And then, yeah, so placement came about. I was really doing just sort of research. The thing that I was asking myself is, how can I contribute to this continued success of Western civilization? That's sort of the undertone. And for me, that's about, how do you promote freedom of trade? How do you promote freedom of movement? How do you create a sort of, promote a strong, healthy, liberal democracy? And trade for me was very important in that way. It was economic infrastructure for helping people achieve their full potential. And I really wanted to sort of continue that intellectual strain. So it's interesting because I think a lot of people look at Flexport, which was logistics and containerization, and then look at placement, which is, that's like hard industrial infrastructure. And then placement is this like softer coaching business. But I actually think about them in sort of the same intellectual, like if you were to like map intellectual space, we're actually close. And the thing that makes us close is that it's both, like I said, economic infrastructure. The way that I got there was a bit of a backwards way. I was researching people's earnings and cost of living across the country. So I had basically, I downloaded census data, I collated a bunch of data from a bunch of different sources and ran an analysis and realized that a lot of people can make more money on a cost of living adjusted basis simply by changing where they physically live, doing the same work or largely the same work. And I looked at that and I was talking to my fiance who's here, and I was like, why are people in such bad places? Like relative to optimality or relative to what's possible, why are people stuck in these places where the economy is so bad? And I remember her being like, they can't afford to leave. I was like, we should fix that. It seems very important that we should fix that. Like if people would like to leave, are capable of achieving something greater elsewhere, like let's facilitate that. So we tried to start a business doing that.
I just want to pause there for a minute. So we tried to fix that.
Yeah.
There's so many people who just don't want to do something because it's too big. This is pretty freaking big. And our motto or our theme, I guess, this semester is beyond yourself. You say it in a very easy way. I just wanted to fix that. But it's a fundamental change in how people evolve in their careers. It's huge. All right.
Totally.
And
look, I think the thing that makes us, the sort of Western American strain of capitalism that's so unique is that it's the decentralization of control. What do I mean by that? In so many places, there are so many different political economies that you could create where control is centralized at the root. And what's so amazing about America is that you can just go do stuff. People, you don't need permission. If you decide that you would like to give people money to move them across the country and give them coaching, turns out you don't gotta ask permission. You can just start.
so Survey said something last week, which was interesting. She said, you can have all sorts of different ideas, but if you can't explain it easily to someone, it doesn't really matter. How do you take that huge idea and start to explain it to someone so that someone would want to either help you or finance you or believe in you enough that they're like, let's do it?
I made a super nice website. That was step one, just make a super good looking website. It's so fun is
Do we have the website? Well, you can't really see it, but yes,
not on
okay.
this one. Yeah, so the way that we started the business was we honestly just started. I had done this economic analysis. I had decided that there was some good targets. So people that basically were living either in extremely expensive cities. So if you were like a low level knowledge worker in San Francisco, New York, Miami, or in some cases LA, you could do far better just by moving to a place that's a top tier university school or city actually. Raleigh or in some cases Boston, not often, Colorado, Austin, Nashville, places that were booming second tier cities that you just get a lot more bang for your buck. In some cases you'd take a pay cut, but your sort of hedonic adjustment, your cost of living based adjustment would be much better. So we just started. We put up a website and we started running ads to people.
This is not your fiance.
No. This is my co-founder, Katie Kent. So Katie was on the product management team at Flexport. She actually helped run our LCL product, which is called less than container load, which is like Uber Pool for ocean containers. You put a bunch of people's stuff in the same container and send it across the ocean. Very competent. And her background was in ed tech. So she had started a boot camp. And so taking this sort of top-down macroeconomic approach to the market, joined with her more coaching experience, she ran their placement program there, and merging those two things together let us really take people, teach them what they should be doing, and then give them those soft skills that would help actually let them level up.
So that's how you all started, and with this incredible website. And I didn't know why exactly you had this in the living room or dining room area, but it does look nice.
So here, this is pre-COVID, top right. That's our first dollar. That's us celebrating our first dollar. We got somebody placed. They paid us. We were very excited. And then,
Wait, I like that. It's not like the physical dollars there.
no, it's just because it's it comes into your digital bank account. No one sees their first dollar anymore.
Very
So,
nice.
you just gotta throw it up. And then ultimately what happened with that line of business, and I think that this gets into some of the things that we were talking about around pivoting. A little thing, I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's in 2020, I think how COVID hit.
Oh, yes.
I don't know. I mean, the whole concept of relocating people for work just completely crashed and burned.
That's obviously duh.
Right. So we're moving people around the country for work, and all of a sudden people are not moving anywhere for work. They're not going to work. And we were faced with this super existential threat. I mean, it was so fascinating because on one hand, people were moving all over the place. They were more mobile than they'd ever been before, but their jobs were staying the same, or they were getting jobs in totally random new places. Like the rise of remote changed everything, and we just had to adjust. So, sometimes it's funny because we didn't originally start the business thinking we were going to be a coaching company. We originally thought we were going to be this like labor arbitrage business, but people loved the coaching. They were still reaching out to us about coaching, even though they were sort of trying to like squeak by the relocation element. So we just dropped the relocation thing. Like we had just raised $3 million from some of the top funds in Silicon Valley on this pitch of we're relocating America, we're reallocating the talent pool, and then 6 months later, completely different business.
How do you have to talk to your investors about that then? Or do you?
So you do. I mean, we had high trust. So all of the investors that we worked with, at least the big dollars, the primary backers, the people that we knew, all of them were in panic mode over COVID. That was like the most insane year. Everybody thought there was this like amazing memo from Sequoia. It was like rip good times. They thought the market is over, startups are done. We've had a great 12-year bull run, and it's over. And then 3 months after that, they're roaring. Like every startup is booming. So I think they're a little distracted. I honestly I don't know that anybody really was too concerned with placement.
So as you all are pivoting this way, there are two of you. Is it still two of you?
We had hired a bunch of people. So we went remote. So the picture in the living room is the office post remote. That was just that, we all lived in our living rooms.
Nice.
Thank you.
But so did you have to fire anybody?
Not at that moment. Eventually, yes. We try to make it work. We try to adapt the business. Eventually, if your business is not quite, if the original idea that you're predicated on doesn't pan out and you have all this staff for your previous business model, what are you going to do? You got to rationalize that. It sucks.
But you still are staying true to your original premise that you want to fundamentally change how people are basically making the most of what they can be doing.
That's right. Like our mission through the whole business has been the same. The mission is that we want to unlock human potential.
That's it. Unlock human potential. That's all.
Yeah, we're just we'll do our part.
And so can you explain how it does work? Like what we like if someone were to go online, be like, oh, mentoring is so important. Fernando, you talked about mentoring too. Like, what do I do?
Well, so I'll tell you a little bit about how we wound up where we are, because I think it's more interesting than the specifics of what we do today. The original business model was structured as an income share agreement. Has anybody heard of an income share agreement? Yeah, see, this is the thing. Most people hadn't heard of an income share agreement. It was one of the weaknesses of the business model. The way it worked is we basically said, hey, we're gonna give you coaching services, and we're gonna relocate you, and including give you cash if you need it. And when you get a new job, we're gonna take a percentage of your income, contingent on you getting a raise. So if you didn't get a raise, we wouldn't actually take any money from you. It would be totally free. It was risk-free. Sounded super cool. And I loved talking about this because it was so awesome.
And it's not that atypical. It's fairly typical that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, most people, well, pre-COVID, it was working very well. Yes. Post-COVID,
yeah,
for reasons that we probably won't get into, but turns out that didn't work post-COVID. Income share agreements have lots of problems. One of the big problems is that people just don't understand them. They're actually quite simple. It's like income is over X, you pay us Y. It's not that complicated. But nobody had ever signed one of these contracts before, so that didn't quite work. So it was December 2020, And then January 2021, we changed the model from an income share agreement, which was only contingent on success, to a subscription model where you actually had to pay for coaching.
Yeah.
And the reason for this was really because people kept signing up, spending a bunch of time with us, and then just ghosting us. You know, like, dang it, like spending all this money on people and they're not that committed. And it turns out I've talked to lots of founders who have tried income share agreements, and commitment's the biggest thing. You have, in any two transactions or any transaction, you have what's called counterparty risk, right? What's the risk that your counterparty fails? And in this case, the counterparty was our customer, and a lot of the time they just bailed because getting a job is stressful. And there was also a bit of a selection effect, right? Meaning people who were really interested in the income share agreement tended to have really bad credit and had sort of hit the rock bottom. And there were people that were more risky to begin with, which was what we were really excited about. Like, we were really excited about serving that group of people. We wanted to give people that had no access to coaching access. But we're just bleeding money. Like, we hammered $1 million and had to stop that.
Without having hot tubs.
No hot tubs, no lavish office.
Yeah.
You know, we were operating pretty Spartan, but yeah, the economics of that business didn't work. So we tried the subscription program. People love the subscription program. It was like, hey, you get to meet with your coach 2 times a month, and you pay one flat fee. It was expensive, but it would be worth it. Ultimately, that people love that, but people wanted to consume it at different levels. Some people wanted to meet weekly or just every once in a while. So we changed the model to being a credit-based system. You buy a pack of credits. You get to meet with your coach whenever you want.
It's the fourth pivot. Fifth, fourth?
Well, I'll tell you what, in between, we actually started a SaaS business selling a whole platform to businesses. Total disaster. Don't do that. I mean, SaaS businesses are great, but like, don't try to run 2 businesses at once. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to learn this lesson in my life.
It's only, what is it? 3's a charm?
Yeah, let's hope.
So where are you right now?
Yeah, so our new business, it works excellently. Coaches love it. So the way that it works is we're kind of like Uber for coaching. Coaches that are independent contractors come to placement. They usually are supplementing their income with coaching. They usually do something else as well. Maybe they have a full-time job or run a consultancy, or maybe they're just retired. And they come to placement to work with people because, for the most part, they would like to contribute back. That's the story that we inevitably hear from people. Mm-hmm. And then, so consumers get to show up, pick from coaches that they're interested in, and work with whichever ones they want.
So this idea of Uber for coaching and being able to describe your business that way, it's really key. I mean, you say it so easily, but people get it immediately. And if you can do that when you're thinking about your business, I mean, not that you all have to be Ubers or something, but it's helpful. Who are some of your favorite coaches or most unusual coaches?
Oh man, I don't know. It's funny because they're all sort of. I don't know that any of them are too unusual. One of my favorite guys is this guy Jeff. Jeff, when he first started working with placement, had actually never coached anybody before. He also, ironically, was my neighbor. I don't know how that worked out, but he's a customer success manager, and he loves coaching people that are earlier in their career on account management, customer success, and salespeople. And he just has this like infectious energy. Every time I meet with him, I actually still meet with him one-on-one in person, because he just has this energy that's like, man, like I need a little dose of his infectious energy.
So it seems like during COVID, it's a perfect time. I don't know about you all, and maybe it's fun to be in school, it's fun to be back in person, but it's like a lifeline to have a coach, especially during a time like this. What happened, like what do you look for and be aware of as we hopefully move, I keep saying, like from pandemic to endemic?
One of the things that we heard from our customers that, pivoting that many times sucks. Let me just tell you. You hear stories about founders pivoting. Pivoting sucks so bad. If you can not pivot, don't pivot. But if your business is going to die, you'd rather just not die. I mean, I like to joke that, the number one key determinant of entrepreneurial success is just psychotic levels of persistence. Like if you can just persevere through the most painful things and not run out of money, eventually something's going to work. But one of the things that kept me going was one of our customers said this one specific quote, but it was mimicked in other people as well. She said, "You have been the most helpful, consistent presence in my life during COVID." Yeah. Placement. Some random person. Like we were the most consistent presence in her life. And during that time, she went from being a office manager, clearly there was no offices to be managed, to now she's a user researcher at Google.
That's so, to be able to do something that improves somebody's life is kind of a, I don't know, it's a little bit of a dream come true. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
When you're at a point where you're about to pivot personally now, a little bit, hopefully, getting married, but what, kind of when you're getting ready to talk to a large group of students who kind of have some shared experience with you, I know you were thinking like, what do I want to leave people with? Like, I'm curious, what you have, I think, an unusual path. What are some of the things that, like, sound bites or thoughts that you have as everybody is starting different or continuing different parts of their careers or new ventures?
I think the biggest thing is, there's two, and one is particularly important. You got to be in the game to play the game. So step number one is just get in the game. If you have an amazing business idea, maybe you want to revolutionize energy or you want to fight climate change. The reality is that nobody takes you seriously, takes your meetings until you're actually like sort of the person in the arena, right? And what do I mean by that? Honestly, it's better to just have some rough idea and just commit. You say, I'm doing this thing. Like with placement, I just started telling everybody, I was like, look, I run placement. We're relocating people across America for better economic opportunity. Honestly, if you had done the business fundamentals, the business model was not good. But you can't learn all of the specific ways in which it's not good and the specific ways in which it's not going to fail unless you get into the game. And if you're waiting for perfection, you're never going to get there, right? Like I'm very much a top-down business analyst type of guy. Like I'll look at a business and say, look, like there's weakness on your cash conversion cycle. It's weakness because you got to hire the right, like this very specialist group of people. Like that's a big risk. The market might not materialize. Like there's all these ways that you can analyze a business. And I analyzed my own business and thought like, this thing has 10 red flags and I'm going to do it anyways. Because I fundamentally believe in the mission and I fundamentally believe that there is a business to be built in this general direction. Maybe the particulars are wrong, but you're never going to figure out exactly what way it's going to work unless you actually get in there. And we're 4 pivots, 5, whatever later, and we now have something that's working. You just got to, I would have loved for it to have been the first one or the second one, but sometimes you just got to put yourself in there.
I'm struck as you're talking how incredibly well-spoken you are about things. And that's fantastic, but it's also intimidating. And I'm just wondering if you've always been able to talk to people. And yeah, I'm just curious how, it's not everybody who's on, a couple of different news shows.
Some people get the gift of gab, some people don't. There's all types of leaders. Not every leader needs to be comfortable speaking in front of a large group. Or I don't know if you guys seen early Elon Musk interviews. The guy was so awkward, and yet he's sending people to Mars. So I do personally think that I have the gift of gab. Not everybody does, but I don't think that's necessary. If you don't feel like you're that eloquent, 2 things. First off, work on it because you totally can work on it. I think I took maybe 2 communications classes at Haas that were exceptional.
It doesn't really help when you tell us what classes you took.
It doesn't?
Because I feel like you didn't attend them.
Yeah,
so yeah.
I did
okay.
attend the communications class. I
Right.
loved speech class. I think some people, some people hate speaking in front of people. I love it. So, but I also feel like I learned a lot and improved a lot as a speaker in those classes. So if you don't feel like you're good at it, practice. And secondly, don't feel like that's going to fundamentally impede you on entrepreneurial activities. I will say it might impede you on some businesses, right? Like if you're an introverted type of person or you're like deeply technical, you may consider doing something deeply technical and working with deeply technical people. Like if you need to be a social media influencer for the business that you're interested in and you're not very comfortable in front of the camera, probably like a founder idea mismatch there, right? Like you really got to find the idea that's right for you and your skills.
Is there a motto or a song or a book or a quote that just keeps you going? Because you seem to just keep going.
Oh man. So when I was 17 years old, I got a tattoo on my chest. I won't show it to you for obvious reasons, but I got it. So I went to college when I was 17. I graduated early, and the tattoo is literally a lion ripping out of my chest, if you can believe how absurd that is. And I got this done when I was 17, and the reason why I did it, so I got it done in honor of my dad. My dad passed when I was quite young, and the reason I got it was because it was this symbol of courage. And I thought, look, at some point, my skin will look bad. If I have this ugly tattoo on my body, who cares? At what point am I going to look in the mirror and see the symbol of courage and think like, wow, I wish I didn't have that persistent reminder. So I did that, and every single day I see it. And it's just this constant reminder to be courageous, to take life, just charge straight at it. And I think there's a difference between courage and stupidity. You definitely, or fear, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's facing fear head on and sort of galloping off into the distance anyways. And yeah, I think that it was a very important decision to me.
I really am glad you talked about something that is literally near and dear to your heart.
100%.
Thank you for sharing with us so far. I know you all have lots of questions, because I have lots of questions, but I'm going to stop talking. So raise your hand. So if you have, go ahead. We'll just kind of go around the room. It would be fantastic if you could introduce yourself. It can just be first name and what you're studying.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm studying. Does this work?
Yeah. You can even stand if you want.
I'll
you
stand.
don't have to,
okay,
though.
Incredible. I'm about as tall as people sitting anyways. But hi, I'm Nikki. I'm a freshman studying CS. My question is sort of about like placement in general, but I guess you were talking about how the concept of getting a job was really foreign to you around 21. Even with Flexport, you joined as a startup and like built it up. Since there's a lot of career coaching services and you've had like less traditional work experience necessarily than maybe some other founders, how do you get customers and in particular coaches to trust that your business is the one that they should be working with?
Yes, the question is, given that I had a slightly less traditional path, how did I get people to trust me? I think most people wind up having an untraditional path, especially in the modern era. There is no average human. I think that that's really important. Everybody has something that's different. And I had experienced a lot of success in spite of having a non-traditional background. So at some level, I was a credible person. I also didn't tell my story the way that I told it to you all. I told the story differently. But so at some point I was credible. The other thing was I spent a lot of money on a very nice domain name. Like placement.com is just an awesome name. And part of it, me and my co-founder sat down and we were like, okay, we either hire a marketing team or a marketing person, or we buy this domain name. And I was like, look, if we have some fly-by-night type name, nobody's going to trust us. And at the time, we were doing income share agreements. It's like, are you really going to sign your income away to, jobsearchcoach.io or .xyz or something? Like, you're just definitely not going to do that. 6 figures on this domain name. I think that made a huge difference. And then we just spent tons of money blasting people with ads. There's this really interesting effect, which is the more often somebody sees your brand, the more credible and reputable they think you are. But in the internet era, it's like super easy to hit the same person with your brand constantly. And so people start thinking that you're huge. People are like, oh, I see you everywhere. And it's like, that's right, you do. Most people don't, but you do.
That's very interesting. Oh, who was your first customer?
This guy named Michael Chambers. Maybe I shouldn't have said his name. That's a bit, well, he's on our website. This guy, Michael, is awesome. So when I was raising money for placement, our investors asked, and I kid you not, they said, in these small American cities, what if all the good people are already gone? It's like, what? Like, what if all the good people are already gone? They're like, yeah, if you're going to relocate people to high growth hubs, what if they're all already there? What if everybody that's left behind isn't good? And honestly, I hadn't even considered that, because I consider myself an optimist and thought that was quite a pessimistic view. And lo and behold, Michael Chambers was our first guy, and I don't remember where he was at, but he was this PhD in data science who was having a super hard time getting a job, and it was mostly a confidence thing. He didn't know how to reposition his like statistical expertise to actually get a job. So he was a PhD in statistics, not data science. And we wound up working with him to get him an amazing job. I can't remember the company. I think we took him from, I'm not going to say the specific numbers. We increased his income by 400%. We did that and we were like, this business is going to work. Like, we're finding guys like Michael left and right. You know, we actually started the business, we were running aptitude tests on people at scale. So, you know, you sign up for placement, you take an aptitude test, and if you were smart, we'd work with you. That was kind of it.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Thanks for that question. I know we must have more questions. Yeah, we've got three. 1, 2, 3. Come on, other side of the room. You needed some questions too. Do you all see? Do you see, Rishi, there are 3 people in the back? Or are you, yeah.
Right. Hi, my name is Chandler Supple. I'm studying computer science. So you mentioned that ports are very complex. They're highly automated. I think the other thing that goes with that is that they're very high stakes. So when you were working on Flexport, when the software was still in its infancy, how'd you convince people to pilot for you? Or how'd you get early customers?
This is a great question.
Can you repeat it also?
So what he asked was, logistics is very high, it's very complex and high stakes. How did this tiny little startup convince people to work with us? Well, what's interesting is that freight forwarding tends to be a business that's, I call it a dude with a cell phone business. A lot of these companies that people trust with their freight are just some guy with a cell phone who knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. And you know, maybe there's some paperwork and they kind of just trade phone calls to make stuff happen. So first and foremost, the state of the art for small companies was not much better than what we had. Secondly, what we did was we hired really awesome people very, very quickly. And again, I use the royal we. I didn't do this. Ryan Peterson did this. He hired amazing people that were from the industry. And at the very beginning of the business, and honestly, for a lot longer than you might think, some shipments were just run the old school way. And the reason was this, we weren't dogmatic about automation. We were dogmatic about customer experience. Automation is part of that, right? If we can automate the collection of status data around like, where is the boat, then that's a superior customer experience. It also at some point reduces cost. But we were super deep on customer service. Like, we pounded the drum on customer service from day one. I think our NPS, so you guys, who knows the metric NPS? Net Promoter Score. So Net Promoter Score is a business metric that people use to measure how likely their customers are to recommend them to somebody else. And it's used as a leading indicator for growth. Because as you might imagine, if your customers are sharing you and talking about you to other people that they know, then you're going to grow faster because your customers are doing your sales for you.
You know how in our feedback survey, we always ask, would you want this person to speak again? That's our version of our Net Promoter Score for Newton.
Love it, love it. So the way that you calculate Net Promoter Score is you ask the question on a scale of 1 to 5. If somebody gives you a 4 or a 5, you consider that a good score. If somebody gives you a 3, it's neutral. And if they give you a 1 or a 2, they're a detractor. It's actually a score of 1 to 8. You use 1 to 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, who cares. The industry standard is a negative 20. That means that people are likely to slander the company to their friends. Flexports was, for most of the time I was there, above 80. So the scale is negative 100 to 100. We were an 80. Apple's is 72. So we got people to trust us because we just went the extra mile by showing up for them. We did stuff that nobody else would do for them. And the software really was built over time in the back end as a way to, like I said, bolster the user experience and over time drive automation. But what's interesting is that for the longest time, the unit economics were worse than traditional freight forwarders because the traditional freight forwarders were either guys on cell phones or the big at-scale companies were running on these like back-end mainframes, which were super efficient at operations, but were awful from a customer experience standpoint. So I think the narrative in the public sphere is that Flexport was this automation company, but we weren't actually an automation company. We were a customer experience company, which is why the company now is doing $3.3 billion in sales, just 8 years after, I think 8 years after being founded. And it's because of that relentless focus on customers.
I know there are some questions in the back there. Yep, you see that hand? One hand back there.
Hi, my name is Kush. I'm a computer science major. First off, I want to say we love your candor. I think it's really great to hear someone speak so frankly about the industry and about business and whatnot. So my question kind of goes off of what some of the other questions were. And so last year, Ryan Peterson actually came and spoke to us. And most notably, at least to me, he said that, at least for a startup, don't use technology unless you absolutely need it because it sucks company resources, capital, and overcomplicates the business. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Can you, do you mind?
Yeah,
That's
I can
such a
repeat
good
it.
thing. Could you just read that one more time, more slowly?
Sure. It's not an exact quote, but
Yeah.
don't use technology unless you absolutely need it because it sucks company resources, capital, and overcomplicates the business.
So,
So don't use technology unless you absolutely need it because it sucks resources and overcomplicates your business. I see why he said that, and to a large extent, I agree. One of the things that's so interesting about software is it's not, don't shoot the messenger, it's not that hard to write software. It's extremely hard to change software. Once you have written software that's out in the wild and running and customers are using it, and you have other systems that are dependent on it, changing software is really hard. So at the time that you make a decision to write software, man, it better be sort of in the right ballpark. Because if it's not, you're going to spend a lot more time changing things later. So for a business like Flexport, the core value proposition that we were driving was not software. We were delivering freight, and so the freight needed to get delivered. And to some extent, the business was this really weird thing because the way that you run freight when you're doing 10 containers is structurally different than 1,000 and structurally different than 10,000 or 100,000. And the reason is not just because, oh, we are more sophisticated, we know more. It's because you unlock new procurement strategies at different scales. What do I mean by that? If you're only doing 10 containers a year, you don't get to talk to the ocean shipping lines directly. You got to go through layers upon layers of intermediaries. So if you design software around managing a process that is inherently going to change the second that you succeed, you're going to waste a lot of time. And so what we did was we spent time building software for things that were fundamental, particularly around the customer experience. And we didn't automate things that we knew were going to be structurally changing in a week or a month or even a year. Like we focused in on that customer experience and only automated the things that we had real true staying power. For the most part, we also made tons of mistakes and automated stuff that we definitely should not have been automating. Which is why I think he can say that with, I guess, deep experience in having actually done the thing that he advised against in some cases. Mostly at my bequest, to be honest. I was a software guy, so it's pushing a lot of automation that later on didn't work.
I think that's interesting. Thank you for bringing that. And more questions. I'm kind of curious. Yeah. Fernando, do you see back? Now you have to like painfully see me like direct back to the right.
And just one last point on that, on the candor. One of our core values at Flexport was practice candor, so I have lots of practice.
And I was just going to say, like, really, this is your opportunity. Almost no holds barred.
Let's go.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us. My name is Vanessa, and I'm a first-year student attending business. And I was wondering, how were you able to develop technical skills such as coding after graduating with a business degree?
I developed technical skills prior to coming to Cal. I think, anybody here a nerd? A couple of self-described nerds? I feel like nerds on the internet, I grew up, when the internet was a little bit wild, wild west, and I know so many people that are software engineers that started writing software because they wanted to cheat games. And I was cheating games. You guys are probably too young. There was a very silly game called Neopets. Anybody ever heard of Neopets? I used to write so many bots for Neopets when I was 10 years old. It was amazing. So I learned how to program when I was pretty young, making websites. And then when I got to Berkeley, I realized how important it was and just sort of started learning on my own. But what I think was really interesting was I didn't feel, and this maybe is different now, I didn't feel like the curriculum of the computer science degree suited what I wanted to do with technology. I wanted to build stuff, products, web apps, whatever. And I felt like the computer science curriculum was focused very much on exactly what it sounds like, computer science, deep algorithmic work, compilers, how do you actually optimize at production or at scale production systems, that type of thing. I wasn't interested in being a software engineer. I loved writing software. Writing software, I think, is probably one of the best things ever. If you don't write software, you should try it. But I always wanted to start businesses. So I wanted to learn practical things, like how do I make websites? How do I make mobile apps? And there was no classes for that. So I just did that in my spare time and then took, like I said, I did Haas because I could then learn skills that I would never teach myself in my spare time, right? Like how many people in here have taught themselves financial accounting?
Oh, there we
yourself,
go.
God, you guys are awesome. I found that the class to be so boring, yet one of the most important things I ever learned, right? But I taught myself neural networks because they were freaking interesting, right? Like some things you're just like intellectually drawn to, and some things you're not. But some things that you're not drawn to are important. So I forced myself to do that through coursework, and then all the things that I thought were just interesting, I just did in my spare time.
So you talked about your speech class or your communications class. What other classes do you actually like?
I took a class. It was one of these. It's a rhetoric class, and every single day the teacher, it was like a small class, like 12 people, and every single day the way that we started was he would ask, "What does it mean to understand something?" And it was just a round table, and there was never a right answer. It was so interesting. Something that I thought I understood, which is just the nature of understanding, took a whole semester. At the end, I finally felt like it had clicked. But one of the things that's so special about understanding something new, something deeply, is that you can say the words, but that click is really something that happens internal, right? Like the classic Isaac Newton sitting there and an apple falls on his head and bam, the theory of gravity. All of the raw information was already in his brain. It's like that final bridge in his brain gets crossed. Or you look at Darwin. Darwin's theory of evolution was apparently analyzing finches in the Galapagos Islands. Yet, if you look at his notebooks, he had pretty much fully baked that theory by that point. But there was something that happened at that moment that clicked. And I think having that understanding that there are these moments where understanding happens very deeply was powerful. And it was like totally just like it satisfied my humanities. I was super uninterested in going to this class, but it wound up being really important.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, one more question. While you have that question up, I'm actually also going to post our code, just so you know, so everybody knows, and we'll have it posted for a little while. Oh, this is not the code. But it was Mike Tyson who said it.
Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, this is a great one. This is startups. This is why you got to get in the game, right? You got to have a plan, and at some point, what you think is going to happen is not what's actually going to happen. The world's too dynamic for you to predict it perfectly.
Go ahead. Who had the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Alejandra. I'm a full-time MBA student, and I think something that's really interesting, and I've thought about this like throughout your talk and just with every question, is this concept of trust. It seems like everyone's asking questions, whether it's at Flexport or placement, that one way or another touch on the trust. And I'm wondering, how do you think about that at placement from a product perspective? Being like you're talking about people's professional careers. Would love to hear that.
I think it's a really important question. So how do you think about trust, particularly in the context of placement with people's careers? I think one of the great inventions of the Web 2.0 era was ways to create decentralized trust or sort of at-scale trust. We've all experienced systems that build trust. They're rating systems. So Airbnb, do you trust this host or not? Well, there's multiple layers to that. There's layer one, which is what steps has the platform taken to vet that this person is good? Secondly, no vetting process is perfect. After the person has been vetted, what have other real people experienced with this person? And then thirdly, if something goes wrong, what guarantees does the platform give to me in case something does go wrong? With placement, we have a very rigid vetting process for coaches. So we check to make sure that they have either coaching credentials from top-tier coaching institutions that they've used for a number of years, or that they're executives at companies that we trust. We also run background checks to make sure that those credentials are valid and they're not being fraudulently presented. Beyond that, once somebody works with a coach, every single session they're asked to rate the session. And if somebody rates the session poorly, we intervene immediately. And if a coach gets rated too poorly too many times, they just get dropped from the platform. It doesn't work. Because again, we're super customer success. I mentioned customer obsession at Flexport. We're super customer obsessed at placement. At this point, I think our CSAT score, slightly different metric than NPS, which is customer satisfaction score, is 98%. And the way that we do that is by rigidly, rapidly culling any or intervening with any coaches that don't meet that bar. And then yeah, if something goes wrong, I mean, look, I think the number one thing that you can say as a business is I'm sorry. If something goes wrong, you just apologize and own it.
We are coming towards the end of the hour, and something that you may not know, or the end of the half hour, is that way back in the old days, we had this opportunity for people to come and ask one-on-one questions. It was like fascinating. People like didn't have anything, and then suddenly it's like a rock star. So even though we're in these funky times with masks, if you're okay with it, if people have some questions, I thought it would be great if you could stay just a little bit longer and either up here or down here, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, come say hi.
But in the meantime, this has been a phenomenal way, after 2 years of not being present with everybody, to have this gift. Thank you. Just for everybody here, should people want to get in contact with you, is there a way?
Find me on Twitter.
Find you on Twitter.
Search my name on Twitter. I'm all over the internet.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.